Good morning, friends. You're listening to a Hasty Podcast. I'm your Dungeon Master, Weston Hasty. You're listening to a Hasty Podcast. Coffee. It's the lifeblood. It's the lifeblood that gives us all life and blood. Lifeblood. Hello. Welcome to the podcast. Sorry, I was just getting some of my music playing. I've mentioned this before, but if you're watching this on YouTube, because I have a YouTube, but you can also listen to this on any of your favorite podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. There's a couple others, Anchor, etc. I'm also on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, though, I wear these headphones. And you might be wondering why. If you haven't been watching the podcast before, you might be wondering why. The reason is because I listen to music while I do this podcast. I like to have the white noise. I like to have the white noise while I talk. If I talk and it's just me, it's like too awkward. Like it's like I get overly self-conscious about the fact that I'm talking. I think it's mostly the echo in this room, which for the most part, I hope you guys can't hear on the microphone. Maybe a little if you're an audiophile. But for the most part, it's not bad. It's not so bad that I'm worried about putting out soundproofing or whatever. I don't know how much longer I'll be living in this specific place anyway, so I don't worry about it. But the point is, I like to have a little bit of music playing. And nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. Today we're listening to smooth jazz. Do you like jazz? We're listening to smooth jazz. I found a playlist on my YouTube Music app. Except that it's not my app. It's the browser. Did you know you can, if you have, or maybe anybody can do this. At one point in time, YouTube Music was only for YouTube Red/Premium members. I think anybody can listen to it now. It just has ads or whatever. But did you know you could do that through the browser? There's an app. This is not sponsored. This is a complete side tangent that I didn't think I was going to talk about. There's an app, YouTube Music, or you can go to music.youtube.com. and just play music. So if you're someone that listens to a lot of music through like YouTube, you can go to music.youtube.com instead of youtube.com, and you can do like playlists and stuff. It's really convenient. You can search by music instead of having to search by videos and stuff. I like it a lot and I use it a lot. Today we're listening to smooth jazz. I found a playlist that I'm listening to. You guys can't hear it. It's just me. It's all for me. I'm very selfish like that. I will not share. But yes, welcome to the podcast. It's Thursday, and that means tomorrow is Friday, and tomorrow is a very special, I forgot to mention this yesterday, there's a very special episode coming out tomorrow. We have a special guest, so we have an extra long, hour-long podcast episode tomorrow on Friday that you won't want to miss. We have a very special guest. We revealed who it is that I am interviewing / talking with, speaking with, conversing with. We revealed that on the Patreon at patreon.com/Weston Hasty, where for as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show and take part in our little weekly super mini podcasts that are an extension of this one. It's Wednesdays with Weston, where we just talk about behind the scenes stuff, things that are coming up. It's once a week. The more people that join the Patreon, the more we're going to do, basically. So if you haven't checked out my Patreon, once again, it's patreon.com/Weston Hasty. I revealed who the guest is yesterday. But if you're not a member of the Patreon, you'll just have to tune in tomorrow so long as I haven't screwed everything up, which sometimes I do, tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp Central Time. That's like 9 a.m. Eastern Time, or like 6 a.m. Pacific Time, or some other times if you're on the other side of the planet. So that's coming up tomorrow. But today's topic, as you can probably tell by the title and thumbnail of the YouTube video, or just the title of the podcast episode, or by the fact that I introduced myself as your Dungeon Master today, there are many clues that might give you the hint that today we're talking about the old D&D, the Dungeons and Dragons. That's right. And I was trying to think of topics for the podcast, and this was like a one that I haven't really talked about on the podcast before. One of the many things that I do in terms of hobbies and such is I play a little bit of D&D. I still consider myself relatively new at D&D, but now now that I think about it, I've been playing D&D for a couple of years now, which doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it's been a couple of years, because it's like a once a week or once every couple weeks, depending on people's schedules, that I actually get the chance to play. So I feel like I haven't played a ton of D&D, but it has been for a while now. I started out as a player. My first character, Charlie Pinknose, was a wizard who was pretty much terrible at everything, except was technically highly intelligent, but extremely unwise with that intelligence. So he was one that would run his mouth and say the dumbest things. Almost went to prison, although some Nat 20'd his way out of it. Let's put it that way. The court case went. There was a court case. Charlie Pinknose almost went to prison. He went to court. He was found innocent, or at least not guilty. Anyway, that was a story I don't even remember the details of. It all started in a misunderstanding in a bar. Let's put it that way, where after a series of allegations, Charlie stood on trial for potentially very terrible things that, to be fair, he didn't do. He wasn't guilty. It was just a matter of saying the wrong things in the wrong place at the wrong time. Very bad. Anyway, that is neither here nor there. That was my first character. As I was getting into D&D and figuring out what that is. Dungeons & Dragons, for anyone who isn't familiar, I feel like Dungeons & Dragons has gotten popular enough by far that even if you don't play it, you probably know what it is. If you're an adult, if you're really young, maybe you wouldn't know because you play video games and don't play tabletop games or whatever. But like, I feel like if you're an adult, you've at least heard of Dungeons & Dragons. You know what it is, even if you haven't played it. It's a tabletop game. And by that, I don't mean like a board game. Although, like, you can make boards for, like, combat encounters and stuff. But that's a separate thing. It's not like a board game. It's not a card game, right? It's a tabletop game where there's a dungeon master who's kind of in charge of delivering the story to the players. It's collaborative. The players help tell that story as well because they make decisions and choices and stuff as well as the dungeon master, but the dungeon master kind of presents the world and the scenarios and the combat encounters. The DM does a lot of work in preparing each session, basically, and then the players all play as different characters in this world that the DM sort of presents, right? And so it's a tabletop game where everything happens in your imagination, and a lot of people have, like, maps and boards that they make for combat encounters, or city maps, so you can move around. You can have little pieces, little figures, I think is the word I'm looking for, little figures, and move them around. And there's dice rolling, lots of dice rolling to determine the outcome of any given number of events, sequences, choices, etc. That's where the famous D20, the 20-sided dice, kind of, I think, originated, was from Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know if there was a tabletop before it that used D20s, but there's D10s and 8s and 6s and 4s, technically anything, even D100, which I could never wrap my head around how you were supposed to roll a D100, because it's basically a 10-sided dice with 10s on it, and then you roll a D10 with the 1s, and you know what? For the most part, especially since the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, I mostly use, these days, online. I use Roll20. There are other alternatives to playing Dungeons & Dragons online, but the way I do it with my current group is that we get together in Discord to converse, and then we use Roll20 for our maps and keeping track of our, like, character sheets and stuff. Which is just a website. It's Roll20, but the 20 is like a literal 20, so ROLL20 dot. I almost want to say it's a .net. Is Roll20 a .net? Hang on. It is, Roll20.net. just in case you guys wanted to look it up for some reason, we use that as well as Discord to sort of do our campaign. Because in my group, there are 4 of us. There's been other people that have come and gone in our group over the course of the last couple of years that we've played. My brother was the first DM that we had in the online group that we were doing. And in his campaign, there was several people came and went. Me, my buddy TJ, which you've probably seen on my streams. Ian's in it now. He wasn't in it in Wiley's campaign, but he started in my campaign. Yes, that's when he started, which you'd recognize from streaming, as well as some other people. Alex, who I've mentioned on the podcast before several times, was a part of Wiley's campaign for a while, and then schedules changed and he kind of bounced out. We've had tons of people come and go in his campaign, and unfortunately his campaign kind of came to an end just because everybody's schedules went one way or the other, and we had to wait on whether or not certain things could happen, and it just got really complicated, unfortunately. So we kind of did a reboot. And I took on the mantle as DM. I really wanted to do it. I wanted to try dungeon mastering. I wanted to try it myself because as a player, I loved being a player. It was fun. But I just really wanted to try doing dungeon master, and I just really wanted to be in charge of the systems and stuff and help sort of deliver story and that kind of thing. It just really felt up my alley. It was something I really wanted to do. I wish I had more time to prepare more for each session. I feel bad for my players that my preparation is not as good as it could be, but they seem to enjoy it anyway. They seem to enjoy it. Or at least that's what they tell me. So thankfully it's working so far. But point is, we're in a 4-person group, myself included, my brother Wiley, and then TJ, and then Ian, which if you're on my streams on Magic Man Mo, that's our 4-man group, the With the Guys series that we do on Fridays. It's the same 4. It's the 4 of us. We also do D&D on Saturdays. Online and do that. I'm the dungeon master. Like I said, my brother plays, that's Wiley. He plays a half-orc fighter, multi-class with a level of cleric. He wants to do more cleric levels, but he's trying to get more fighter levels first. They're all just level 5. They're almost at level 6. It's taken a while because there's only, it's only a 3-person party, so they can't take on too crazy encounters. And so delivering experience, we're not playing milestones, we're doing experience, which just to say, like, every monster is like worth a certain amount of experience points, and certain other events, the DM can award experience points and that kind of thing. And in Dungeons and Dragons, there's a certain number of experience points you have to hit before you can level up. The alternative to that is playing milestones, where the DM just kind of like decides when you all level up. I didn't want to do that. I play a little loosey-goosey, so we're playing experience points. So needless to say, because it's only a 3-person party, as opposed to like 5 or 6 or whatever, which a lot of D&D groups could have, is a 5 or 6-person party, the encounters aren't crazy, so they don't get a ton of experience every encounter. So it's taken a while. It's taken a while to get to... They're so close to level 6. I think they're going to get it next session. Probably. I mean, it always depends on what they actually end up doing and what ends up happening. But yeah, my brother plays a half-orc fighter with a class of cleric. And then TJ plays a... help me out. They're a monk. Hang on. Did I just forget what race TJ plays as? I think that's because he has a new character. That's right. It's a bunny what's the name of the bunny hang on. D&D rabbit race. Hang on. It's one of the new ones. What the frick are they called? Lapine? I've just been calling him a rabbit. We have this running gag. Please don't hate me. Please don't cancel us. We have this running gag where a lot of our characters tend to be accidentally racist or some kind of ism, because I promise you, I promise you, it's not as bad as it sounds. But it always ends up happening is somebody will say something that is accidentally really insensitive to like another canonical race in the D&D universe. So the joke is that like everybody's kind of racist. It sounds terrible. The one that I thought the one that we still joke about a lot, this was during my brother's campaign, was who was actually, it was TJ's character was playing a dragonborn. He was very tall or whatever, and we were in a town primarily made out of like gnomes, and so like if you went to like inns and stuff, if you needed to go stay at an inn, all the beds were short and stuff like that, right? Everything was small, and TJ just offhanded. Didn't mean anything by it, right? I forget what we had been talking to previously, but he asks the innkeeper, do you have any rooms with regular-sized beds? And so, like, the insinuation was that, you know, to be short, like a gnome or whatever is irregular. Like, you're the weird ones. The frickin' 7-foot-tall dragonborn is normal-sized compared to everybody else. So, like, the joke was that he was, like, short racist, right? So that was the joke with his character. My character, Korax, which was a rogue, had done, what did he do? He was racist too. I think it was also towards short people. I think it was towards short people as well. I don't remember what Korax said. I don't remember what I said for my character that I accidentally became racist to, but I think it was towards halflings instead of gnomes. And it's never intentional. It'll be like someone will say something offhand, and it's like, wait a minute. That's not okay, is it? And then it becomes the whole thing. Sorry, I'm laughing about it because it really, at the time, it really was funny. It's like, oh yeah, because D&D has crazy races, you know, you might say something that's like, oh, wait a minute. Anyway, TJ plays a Lapine rabbit folk monk. And then Ian plays a halfling wizard. So we've got a wizard, a monk, and a fighter cleric in our group. And they're doing really well. We're playing this campaign. I call it Shadows over I can't talk. Shadows over Maradil. And what happened is that, and originally this was a 2-person party because Ian hadn't joined us at the very beginning. So it was just Wiley and TJ. And TJ had a different character at the time, who was Scrampton. Was he a halfling? Yes. Scrampton was a halfling. Hang on. Arcanist. Alchemist. You can tell how good a DM I am. Anyway, point is, I think they were the alchemist subclass of the arcanist class. That's a thing. Anyway, it was just them two, and they were these sort of members of a military branch of the Kingdom of Mar, which is named after an ancient hero. There's a bunch of world building there that I don't even think they know because they haven't bothered to learn it, but that's okay. And they got sort of dragged into this conflict where a mysterious thing, a chest with mysterious contents, was being delivered across the country, and they intercepted it, and it was very dangerous, and they were working with this NPC who needed to bring it back to Mardil, which is the capital city of Mar. And they get there, and things happen. Their NPC that they had been traveling with goes missing. They find him dead. There's this sort of underground, not scandal. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm very at a loss for words today. It's not very good. But there's a conspiracy. That's the word I'm looking for. There's a sort of underground conspiracy infest. Yes, no. What is the word Anyway, it is this mysterious black ooze that, if consumed, turns a person into like a shadow person, basically. Or if even if it's spilled, it itself has magical properties and becomes an entity upon itself and can try to infect. Infect, I think, is the word I was looking for. Infect other people and that sort of thing. It's based off of, for those of you that are into Dungeons and Dragons, it's based off of the Shadow monster from the Monster Manual, but with some extra flair and changes and tweaks on my side. I homebrew a lot of things, at least a little bit, just to make it a little bit special from the actual different manuals, like the Dungeon Master's Manual, the Monster Manual, etc. I kind of homebrewed just a little bit of a lot of things, just to add a little bit of flair. But it's based on that, but instead of being like a monster in its own right, it's also like been constructed. The party doesn't know in what way it's been constructed yet, or manufactured, or whatever. And hopefully they don't hear this podcast. I'm not going to try to give away too many secrets. For the most part, all of this is what they know anyway. I don't think any of them listen to my podcast, but just in case, like TJ does. I think of the three of them, TJ's the most likely one to listen to this. But I won't give away too much about it. But they discover that the sort of head, or at least one of the leaders of this conspiracy, is actually an officer working for the Mardillian guard, which is sort of an internal military group that protects the kingdom, right? As opposed to the actual military branch that takes care of outside the kingdom affairs. And they manage to run him out of town, basically, and they get a quest to go after him and try to bring him back dead or alive. Much better reward if they can bring him back alive, because obviously they want to question him and that kind of thing. But otherwise, he's committed like crazy treason. So if he's brought back dead, there's still a reward for that. And so they've gone off chasing after him, and got eventually, to skip a lot of details, they capture one of his lackeys, who brings them to a forest where there's a camp where he could be. They go to this camp, there's a fight, they get thrown through a rift. Now they're far up north in this sort of mountain range, tundra wasteland, where they're currently on the trail to following this officer, this officer gone rogue, this treasonous traitor, to this city called Laurstadil, which is the Dead City. A city forgotten to time, traveled to not like in the last 1,000 years, only existing in myth that perhaps the city once existed, or that kind of thing, right? And they're trying to track him there, but there are a number of points of interest on the way there, one of which is this observation post run by a frost giant, who at least appears to be friendly to their plight, even offering to help so long as they help him. He runs this sort of outpost that is a refuge for those that have escaped Laurstadil. Laurstadil is a city that turns out truly does exist, and people seem to actually live there, but people are trying to escape there, and they're taking up refuge in this frost giant who goes by the name Mir. They take refuge in his outpost, and they sort of just stay there and have settled to escape. There are a couple other points of interest. There's a giant chasm. The party discovered a map. So they kind of know about the points of interest, but they don't know much about them. There's a giant chasm they could go to. There's a huge swath of land that on the map is just labeled no, that they don't know is what is there exactly. And there's a mountain that is specifically labeled, and then there's, of course, Laurstadil itself. Mir, the frost giant, has informed the party that they can't get into Laurstadil. It's locked down, but he can tell them how to get around that if the party will go to Mount Stalker, which is the mountain that's labeled on the map. If they can go there and defeat the Stalker that lives there, that the mountain has been named after, defeat him and bring back some of the stolen refugees. Kidnapped is the word I'm looking for. Kidnapped refugees. The stalker that lives on this mountain has come into the observation post over time and has kidnapped a number of these refugees. Mir wants them back. So the party needs to go to the mountain and slay the stalker, or at the very least bring back the refugees, and Mir will help them into the city. On the way to the mountain, however, our party has been jumped. They could decide how to get to the mountain, and of course they could decide how they travel, quickly or stealthily or whatever they might want to do. And the path that they took and at the rate that they were going, they managed to get spotted by which they'd heard about. They found this out at the observation post, that there might be a dragon in the area nearest the chasm, and they decided to travel in that direction, and they were spotted. So needless to say, at level 5, they all got to encounter their first dragon, and it was very exciting. I didn't expect them to face the dragon. I knew the dragon was going to be in the area. I was prepared for that. And at the very least, I expected them to try to hide from the dragon instead of run from the dragon. So they try to outrun on land a dragon that could fly. Needless to say, it didn't work. They were caught up too. The dragon, amused by their plight, swoops down and sort of tries to convince the 3 to do a quest for him instead. That or be eaten, basically. The dragon was bored. He's like, I'm kind of hungry. I'd like to eat you, but also I got a proposition for you. And because they went through some conversation a little bit, and the dragon, upon learning that the party is on a quest for Mir, offers instead that if they can kill Mir, the dragon will let them live and even keep the observation post that Mir resides at, because as it turns out, the dragon does not like Mir. They couldn't quite figure out from the dragon why he didn't. The party tried to convince the dragon to offer a different kind of reward. There was some back and forth. Things got kind of tense. The dragon got bored and decided to attack them. There were some failed charisma checks, basically. So the party did combat. The 3 members, all level 5, decided to do combat with my dragon. Not lucky for them, it was a young dragon. It was, I forget what they're called, if it's a young dragon or a young adult dragon, but it wasn't quite an adult dragon. So luckily, and it was a blue dragon, I screwed up. It was supposed to be a white dragon. I have a couple of dragon encounters, written down, and somehow I put the blue dragon in the frozen wasteland. It was supposed to be a young white dragon. Somehow I managed to put a blue dragon, and I didn't even catch it until all of a sudden I started running the encounter. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This is the dragon that breathes lightning, not ice. Oh, well, I guess there's a blue dragon here now, because I'd already gone through this entire thing describing this blue dragon. Don't know how at any point in time during the session I didn't catch my mistake. So sometimes as a DM, you just roll with it. Yep, there's a blue dragon here. That wasn't part of the plan. I mean, it's not impossible. There's no reason a blue dragon couldn't be in the area. It's just not what I meant to do. So we did that. It was great. Our poor wizard, who didn't know anything about dragons, pulled out a 3rd level. I think it's 3rd level. It's not 4th level. He's not that powerful yet. I think it's a 3rd level lightning bolt, lightning strike, lightning something. I forget what it's called. I'm a very good DM. Which is his most powerful spell. But blue dragons are immune. Not just resistant to, are entirely immune to lightning damage. So he pulls his massive spell and it just fizzles on this dragon, and the dragon on his turn just turns around and lightning breaths poor Elgin, which is Ian's character, to near death, knocks him unconscious. Not enough to quite kill him outright, but knocks him unconscious in one go. It was amazing. It was good. So the good news is, at the start of the round, when combat started, Wiley's character and TJ's character both rolled a nat 20 on their initiative. And the way I homebrew that, this is not a real rule, I homebrewed this. On a nat 20 initiative roll, not only do you get to go first, because it's a nat 20, and I usually let even if an enemy rolls a nat 20, I let the players go first. It's more fun. Not only do they get to go first, but they get an additional action. So instead of one action, one bonus action in their movement on their turn, they get 2 actions and a bonus action in a movement. Just for funsies, just to reward the nat 20. I think it's fun. The reverse of that is if you roll a nat 1 on your initiative, you get to lose your movement or your action, your choice. You can do one or the other, but not both. Just to punish you, but it's not too bad. It sucks, but it's not terrible. But the nat 20 is really good. So they both got nat 20s, TJ and Wiley. So on their turns, they got to go first. They pummeled the crap out of that dragon. And then Ian's character rolled above the dragon on initiative as well. So they all 3 got to take their turn on the dragon first at the beginning of the encounter. And in the first 3 turns. Their 3 turns. They did like 50 something damage to this dragon that only had like 150 something health. So they took out a third of his health in 1 round. And I was getting very worried about that until the dragon's first turn came and lightning breaths the wizard straight unconscious. And all of a sudden the party is down an entire member. I am almost out of time for this episode on this podcast. Should I talk more about D&D? We can do that. I could start from the beginning and talk more about this party's exploits. Where we're at right now, there's more to talk about this dragon encounter. There's more to say. Let's just say the party is still alive. The party's still alive. I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger. Should I talk more about D&D on the podcast? Let me know by hitting me up on Twitter at Weston Hasty using the hashtag Hasty Podcast, and let me know if I should talk more D&D on the podcast. I think I probably will. Let me know if I should continue telling you and regaling the stories that the party goes through as we go. Should I start from the beginning? I don't remember everything, but I could figure it out. I could talk to the others, let you know how things go. But basically, my party had their first dragon encounter just the other week. We missed last week, but 2 weeks ago, they had their first dragon encounter, and it was very exciting to see how it goes. Basically, I don't know. I'm not going to nerf the party, but it's really hard to figure out, like, how far I can push them, like, what encounter is too hard, because sometimes I throw them really hard encounters and they crush it. Other times, a character gets one shot. You never know. Let me know what you guys think about D&D. I would love to talk more about it, but unfortunately, we're out of time for this podcast. It's been great. Ask me questions on Twitter. What else do we got? If you enjoyed this podcast and you're listening to this on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple or any of the other podcasting platforms, make sure you give this a follow. Share this with your friends. Let them know that I exist. To help support the show for free, support me with your money if you would like to on patreon.com/Weston Hasty. And tune in tomorrow for a special guest on the podcast, special hour-long podcast tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. All that I ask is that you take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and wash your hands. I'm out here. Bye.